remember my primary exam as if it was yesterday, although it feels like a while ago sometimes.
There was a lot of emphasis put on to the primary exam for the first year and a bit of our training, and I think with good reason.
So there's the two parts of the primary exam, the written and the viva. So the written wasn't as bad as I was expecting.
I think the best advice I can give people for the written component of the exam is just to practice questions early. 150 minutes of writing will leave you with a sore hand, especially if you don't do much writing normally.
So for the written exam, I think you need to practice and practice in a time with a clock and a timer that will go off.
I used a lot of the available MCQ and SAQ banks that are online and available through the college website.
I had a study group. I'm not really a study group person, but I think it's worthwhile for this.
I think it's easier to work in teams, and sometimes, especially when you're working with some conceptually difficult topics, having a peer explain them to you is better than reading 5 books and trying to nut it out yourself.
For me, I found it very useful to have people to sit around, yes, go over MCQs with, but more importantly say, oh gosh, I just could not get my 20 hours of study that I wanted to this week, and to have other people understand I'm exactly the same, and it's good to have that stress relief and realise I'm not the only one.
I recommend begging, borrowing, stealing vivas as best you can from any consultant that will give them to you.
It revolved around practicing vivas, and when you weren't doing it with consultants, you did it with your friends from your study group.
The first week of practicing for vivas was cringeworthy. It was awful. So it's just about getting over that fear, getting over yourself, and just taking on board what people are saying, because it's a really different exam technique.
So I remember walking into my first viva and I'd read the question, I could answer it, but I was very nervous.
I remember being extremely apprehensive, not so much about the exam, but about the outcome.
You go in, you shake hands, you say hello. They weren't people that I knew, they weren't from my hospital or anyone I'd practiced with, but they were still kind of personable, I guess.
There's always a fear of looking silly in front of colleagues and people who you'll work with in the future. I think that drives a lot of the stress sometimes for people. I made it a little bit easier perhaps for myself by trying to remember that all I could do was show them how much I'd learnt, and it wasn't that they were trying to pick holes in my knowledge.
Your mindset will definitely alter the outcome of the exam.
And I think the people who go in negative and worried often find themselves backed into corners and feeling really down about how they've done.
I really enjoyed my third viva because it was a topic that I knew, and the examiners were really friendly, and I totally engaged with them, and I was just talking, and I could feel like I was doing really well.
The more questions you can answer, the more points you can score, the closer you are to a pass. And part of that comes down to being able to say, I'm sorry, I don't know, or I'm sorry, I can't remember at this moment. And the examiners will move you on so you can get as many points as possible to get you through.
I think it's best to focus on not how the examiner is asking a question, but focus on what question they've asked you and answer it to the best of your ability.
People say this and you don't believe it when you're studying, but I think they do actually want you to pass.
So their primary motivation is to improve your performance in the exam and to make sure that you're up to the grade, which the vast majority of you will be.
Their job is to make sure that you've done the work to make you safe at what you do, and that you've been able to show the dedication to be able to get through that exam. Maintaining
a healthy work-life balance tends to make the experience a whole lot more enjoyable overall.
One great piece of advice was from a consultant, and she said you need to make sure you do at least one fun thing a week. She said it doesn't matter what it is, you just need to take a dedicated time out of your week and not even think about study and have some fun.
I think taking care of yourself during the exam time is really important, and I mean things like eating well, or as best you can, and if that means getting someone else to cook for you, then do it.
Looking back, I think the whole exam process and the viva especially, it makes you a better anaesthetist.
Whilst you're preparing for the exam, you might think some of this material is completely outrageous. Why on earth would I ever be needing to be studying this? But as you progress through your anaesthetic training, you do realise that nearly all the material is actually essential to performing your job as an anaesthetist safely and effectively.
You know, at the end of the day, we're doctors. I think the public and our patients deserve to know that, you know, we've covered the important things, and even though clinically day to day they may not be important, they're still all part of our training.